my marijuana use started to decline right before I turned 21, and I'd stopped when I would, like, every once in a while, I'd be like, oh, maybe this time it'll be different, and it never was.
Welcome to In Recovery, Shadowboxing with Life on CCPTV, the Emmy-nominated educational channel of Community College of Philadelphia. I am Dr. Pascal Scoles, Professor of Behavioral Health and Human Services here at the college. The great irony of existence is that what makes life worth living comes from our dark side. It comes from everything that makes us suffer and ultimately heal. As we struggle with life, we're forced to live more deeply and more fully. Many great stories illuminate the shadow side of life. Great leaders understand this, and this understanding makes them humble and effective human beings. Today, my special shadow boxer is William S. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. The show kind of tries to focus and accent on individuals' struggles and how they wind up in a positive space called recovery. Mm-hmm. And so maybe I was wondering, can you start with your history maybe of how you wound up even getting addicted?
Okay. It was kind of it's not even that good of a story, to be honest. I feel like you hyped it up a lot at the
okay.
beginning.
All right.
When I was in high school, I started experimenting with drugs and alcohol. There's a place in North Philadelphia that would sell to us that was underage alcohol.
Oh, okay.
And we would go there pretty frequently, mostly on the weekends.
How old were you, 16, 17?
Yeah, about 17.
17?
It's when it started. My best friend, he got addicted to the Oxycontin at first, and he actually he had an overdose. Fortunately, paramedics were able to revive him.
The Narcan. Probably.
Yes.
Yeah.
But, that got me really fascinated with how drugs affect the body and the mind, and I actually started doing a lot of my own personal research into the topic.
And when you say personal research, you mean use patterns?
Academic and experimental
use.
In nature, yeah.
So for you, you found something in the culture is considered fairly negative, an overdose.
Yeah.
And it made you curious.
Yeah.
And therefore you wanted to experiment more with that topic.
It was that, but it was also I was doing a lot of reading on the subject too.
Oh, okay.
I continued to dive further into the drug culture while also trying to educate myself about it so that I could be like the person that people would come to and be like, hey, is this safe? Is this okay to do? And I'd be like, no, don't do that.
Oh, did you see yourself as being a dealer or a seller or?
No, I wasn't a dealer. I never sold anything. I would, if I had a surplus of weed and my friend needed some, I'd be like, yeah, here, take it. But I never bought in bulk and sold like that.
At the height of your alcohol and drug experience, how much were you doing?
So eventually, I started to decline pretty much all my other drug use habits. The marijuana kind of went. It was starting to make me paranoid, antisocial, yeah, and anxious a lot. So I kind of just stopped doing that. But it was right around when I turned 21. Okay. And so I just kind of replaced that with a lot more drinking. And from 21 to about 24, it was about half a bottle a day. And then towards the end, right before I got into recovery, I could see it increasing. I could see that it was.
When you say a bottle, you mean a fifth, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Fifth.
And it was liquor, I assume, right?
Mostly whiskey.
Whiskey, yeah.
Yeah, that was my choice.
So you go through this college experience and you graduate, I think, with a bachelor's in psychology, if I'm not mistaken,
Correct.
right, from what you've told me. And you leave. and you're still pretty active in what, quote, we call the addiction.
Yeah.
Did it progress after you graduated?
It stayed it plateaued for a while, at about half a fifth a day, and then spiraled downwards into like a third, like, 3/4 of the bottle, then whole bottles eventually.
Per day?
Yeah, per day. I would, this was my daily routine once I got out of college. I got a job. I went to work. I would throw up out of my car window on the way to work. I'd do my job. I'd go to the liquor store. I would come home, and then I would drink the rest of the night. That's what I did for about maybe year and a half, 2 years.
How many years ago was that?
This is really recent.
Like 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, about 2 years ago.
About 2 years ago.
This is when you were still pretty active in your addiction.
Yeah,
You've been active
yeah.
since you were, in college, which is at least 4 years, in the sense of your consumption.
And it did kind of start earlier in high school, but that was more of a wide experimental. That was also like more of a binge drinking weekend kind of thing, than it was a daily activity. But yeah.
Okay, so your introduction to alcohol basically came in high school, and through that high school experience, it was basically a weekend binge drinking experience, which is very similar to the progression that some students had in college, but you were more advanced then. You
Yeah.
were drinking during the day.
Yeah.
And throwing up on Wednesdays, as you said,
Yeah.
and other days probably. Were you doing any other drugs during that time?
My marijuana use started to decline
Okay.
right before I turned 21, and I'd stopped when I would, like, every once in a while, I'd be like, oh, maybe this time it'll be different, and it never was. Like, I always just get too high and paranoid, and I just wouldn't enjoy it, because it made me feel a lot more reserved within myself, and it got me stuck in my own head, whereas with alcohol, I was out and about, and I was,
So it activated you, which it
Yeah.
does for a lot of people, even though it's a sedative drug. But in the early stages of consumption, it actually increases your activity, which a lot of people don't seem to realize, I guess. But it does make you very active, alcohol.
yeah,
Eventually,
very social.
it makes you very social. But eventually, I guess when you got up to almost a fifth, did it slow you down then? Because you were vomiting and you were doing.
Oh, I just wouldn't go anywhere.
Oh, okay. You would.
I would be alone in my parents' basement because I live at home, and that's just what I would do.
How did you make the transition away from, or realize that this is something you need to deal with more effectively? Did you give any of that thought to it, or it just was a slow progression from one idea to another? The reason I ask that while you're thinking, okay, because I know you're thinking about it, is there are many paths to people's recovery. And a lot of times we think, oh, you got to go sober immediately, and it's over with, and it's done with. Yet some people will find their recovery through theater. Some people will find their recovery through art. Some people find it through music. Some people find it by going back to college. And it brings them into a different space. And they realize that they have to do something about their life if they want to be successful or be resilient or transformative, whatever word you like.
It was kind of a gradual thing,
Yeah.
I guess, but it was also, I made some great friends there, but then I also, hurt some people there. And we've since reconciled, and it's fine now, but it kind of made me realize what kind of person I was becoming.
And what did you think you were becoming?
A self-centered jerk,
Oh, okay.
which is not something I ever
Thought of.
envisioned myself as. Yeah.
Were you attending meetings or anything? How did you find some insightful way of looking at yourself differently?
So I first started getting sober back in March of 2017. 17.
Last year.
Last year. That's when I first tried it out, end of March. And I went into it without any kind of plan, any kind of idea. I was just like, I'm just not going to drink. That didn't really work.
What didn't work? When you say it didn't work, it didn't work.
What didn't work was just thinking that I could do it alone.
Okay.
Thinking that I could, you know, heal myself, just myself, and, you know, be fine with it.
Actually, that is the shadow of the addiction,
Yeah.
because it makes you feel that this is something you have to do. You have to man up to it, like, you know, and do it yourself.
Yeah, and like I bought some like self-help books and I read them, and like they were great
They're
books.
helpful, yeah,
They're
they are
helpful, but they're it can't replace kind of a fellowship you kind of can build with other people through different means. And so I tried that in March, and eventually in August I had a relapse. And there were little ones along the way too, but I just kind of brushed them off
Because
they were
had
just
a
like
drink or two.
yeah, and which progressed into like, you know, like my usual, but over a weekend, and then during the week I was fine, and then it was a whole week, and I was like, okay, something.
This is when you relapsed.
Something, yeah, no, yeah, exactly, in the beginning of August.
You know what's insidious about drug use and alcohol use is that whatever pattern you had when you get into recovery, it instantaneously goes right back to that pattern when you relapse. It's not like
Yeah.
you start and say, well, I think I'll have a drink or two for a week. What happens is that within that very short time frame, your neurotransmitters, your brain patterns, or whatever it is there, picks it up and says, oh, I'm used to this activity. You got to kick yourself up to a half again and kick yourself up to a full this. And
Well, it's actually when you mention that, what I think of is the situation that I was in at the time, because I was well, I would drink alone mostly, and during that week-long relapse, I was dog sitting and house sitting for a neighbor. So I was in their house watching their dogs completely alone with a fully stocked bar.
oh, do you feel good about your recovery now?
Yeah, I
Do you
feel
you're
I
on
feel a lot
different-
more stable, and a lot. I feel like I'm actually seeing the positive change come of it, you know, because like when I was in that cycle, all I saw was that day after day after day after day, and now, and I felt stuck, and alcohol was a way for me to
get unglued.
feel unstuck for a little while. But now I'm, you know, actually moving forward with my ambitions and my goals, which were to actually become like a drug and alcohol counselor,
Good.
even though I was,
No, it's a good.
you know, in addiction at the time. Like that's what I thought since I was very young, because like I became so fascinated with drugs, and I thought that maybe that would be where I would go. And I always think it's really funny, like for me personally, that you know, I studied this like by myself, just academically. These are the books that I would read if when I was in college. Anytime I got a chance to do a project on alcoholism or addiction, I would do it. And I, you know, I had all this knowledge, and then I still fall into it. You know,
Yeah.
it really does show how like insidious this disease can be. That even when you have all of the knowledge in front of you,
It still doesn't help.
it still doesn't. It still doesn't help.
Well, maybe that's a good way to end this segment, that knowledge alone will not get you where you want to go.
Yeah.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. I would like to thank my special guest, William, for sharing his recovery journey with us. I would also like to thank you, the viewers, for tuning in. You have been watching In Recovery, Shadowboxing with Life on CCPTV, the Emmy-nominated educational channel of Community College of Philadelphia. I am Dr. Pascal Scoles, Professor of Behavioral Health and Human Services and Director of the Office of Collegiate Recovery. See you next time.